So, good morning, everyone. My name is Arafath, and I teach history on the textbook platform. So, in this session, let us discuss uh, fifth chapter of the eighth standard NCERT. In fact, we started discussing the NCERTs. So, this is basically the eighth standard NCERT. This is the fifth chapter of the eighth standard NCERT. So basically, this chapter deals with the major revolt that broke out in India in 1857. We call this revolt as the Sepoys Revolt. We call this revolt as the Sepoys Revolt. At a point. So this is a very important topic. Let us spend some time discussing various aspects of this particular topic. The various aspects of this topic. So the 1857 revolt was a major revolt to broke out in India. The 1857 revolt was a major uprising to a very major uprising that broke out in India. So the sepoys started revolting against the British. The sepoys, I will explain who sepoys are. So the 1857 revolt was undoubtedly one of the major challenges faced by the British in India. So in 1857, the sepoys revolted against the British with the objective of ending the British rule. So the point is, this revolt began with the objective of ending the British rule. It was undoubtedly a major challenge faced by the British, but unfortunately, this revolt ended up in a failure. This revolt, the 1857 revolt, ended up in a failure. That's the point. So, in this topic, let us take a look at the reasons for the outbreak of the revolt. Let us also understand why this revolt is called the Sepoys Revolt. Let us see the course of this revolt. Let us also understand the aftermath, that is, the outcome of this revolt. So let me repeat. In 1857, a major revolt broke out in India against the British. In fact, this 1857 revolt happened to be the most severe challenge faced by the British during their time period, during their rule. I told you that this revolt was started by the sepoys. This revolt was started with the objective of ending the British rule, but unfortunately, this revolt ended up in a failure. That's the point. That is, the sepoys could not achieve their objective of ending the British rule. Now, let us understand why this revolt started. Let us understand who all participated in this revolt, and let us also see the course of this revolt. That's my point. So basically, this revolt is called the Sepoys Revolt because this revolt was initiated by the sepoys. This revolt was initiated. It was, just a minute. This revolt was initiated by the sepoys, and hence this 1857 revolt is called the Sepoys Revolt. Otherwise, the Sepoys Revolt is also called as the Sepoys Mutiny. It is also called as mutiny. So what is mutiny? Mutiny is a situation in which the soldiers of the army revolt against their superiors. That situation is referred to as a mutiny. What is a mutiny? Mutiny is a situation of the subordinates are soldiers, the ordinary soldiers of the army, when they disobey the orders of their superiors, when they revolt against superiors in the army. Such a situation is referred to as a mutiny. So the Sepoys Revolt is also referred to as the Sepoys Mutiny. This revolt is called the Sepoys Revolt because this revolt was initiated. It was started by the sepoys. But who are sepoys? Basically, the British during their times maintained a large army called the British Indian Army. The British Indian Army. So basically the British had a separate armed wing. The British had maintained a large force in India, armed force in India, called the British Indian Army. So the British Indian Army comprised of both the Indian soldiers as well as the British soldiers. The British Indian Army comprised of both the Indian soldiers as well as the British soldiers. So the Indian soldiers of the British Indian Army revolted against the British in 1857, and hence this revolt is referred to as the Sepoys Revolt or Sepoys Mutiny. Let me repeat this point once again. The British had a large armed force in India during their rule. We call this force as the British Indian Army. This British Indian Army comprised of both Indian soldiers. It also comprised of British soldiers. That's the point. So it was the Indian soldiers of the British Indian Army who revolted against the British in 1857. And hence we call this revolt as 1857 revolt or 1857 mutiny. That's the point. But let me repeat, let me clarify the point here itself. This revolt undoubtedly was initiated by the Sepoys. This revolt, that is the 1857 revolt or mutiny, was undoubtedly initiated by the Sepoys. But as soon as the Sepoys started the mutiny, soon afterwards, the other sections of the Indian society came forward and actively participated in this revolt. Let me repeat. It was the Sepoys who initiated the mutiny, but as soon as the Sepoys started revolting, the other sections of the Indian society, such as the kings, that is the rulers of the different princely states, the zamindars, the peasants, the ordinary cultivators of the land, the artisans, and finally the conservative Indians, all of them came forward and actively participated in this revolt. So the whole point which I am trying to convey is the Sepoys revolt or Sepoys mutiny was not confined. It was not confined to the Sepoys alone. Undoubtedly, it was the Sepoys who initiated the revolt, but as soon as they revolted against the British, it emboldened the other sections of the Indian society to come forward, and these sections of the Indian society also actively participated in the revolt. For example, the rulers of various princely states participated in the revolt. The zamindars, a few zamindars, peasants, artisans, and conservative Indians, all of these groups very, very actively participated in this revolt. At the point. But why? Why did the Sepoys revolt? And why did these many sections of the Indian society, why did they come forward to actively participate in the revolt? It was because all of these different sections of the Indian society suffered as a result of various British policies. The point is, for all of these groups, the common enemy was the British. All of these groups of the Indian society, all of these different sections of the Indian society suffered as a result of various British policies. That's the point. So therefore, when the Sepoys revolted in 1857, immediately these different sections of the Indian society felt emboldened. They came forward and actively supported the Sepoys in their fight against the British. So that's the reason. So the point which I'm trying to convey is this revolt was not confined to the Sepoys alone. It saw the participation of the other sections of the Indian society as well. These are the various sections of the Indian society. Fine. Now let us take a look at the factors that motivated each of these different sections of the Indian society to participate in the 1857 revolt. What made these different sections of the Indian society to participate in the revolt? Let us understand those points. Now we'll take a look at the causes for the outbreak of the 1857 revolt. Let us understand the causes for the outbreak of the 1857 revolt. One cause is, why did the kings participate? I just told you, kings participated, that is the rulers of different princely states participated in large numbers. Now let us take a look at the factors that motivated the kings to revolt against the British. So basically, I already told you in the last two classes that in 1707, the Mughal ruler Aurangzeb died, following which the disintegration of the Mughal Empire proceeded. And within a short span of time, by the way, the last Mughal ruler, the last powerful Mughal ruler happened to be Aurangzeb, and he ruled over a very extensive territory. In fact, he had full control over the entire Indian subcontinent, not just the present day India. He even had his rule spread over Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc. Besides the present day India. But Aurangzeb died in 1707. So within a short span of time, the disintegration of the Mughal Empire proceeded. And within a short span of time, close to 1000 kingdoms came into existence in India. Close to 1000 kingdoms came into existence in India with the disintegration of the Mughal Empire. Of these 1000 kingdoms, the British conquered roughly 500 kingdoms. Not exact figure, but roughly 500 kingdoms were conquered by the British. But in what time? The British conquered these 500 of these 1000 kingdoms between 1756 to 1857. In fact, 1757 to 1856. So between 1757 and 1856, the British conquered roughly 500 of these 1000 kingdoms. Then what about the other 500 kingdoms? The other 500 kingdoms continued to survive. In fact, the other 500 kingdoms in India continued to survive till 1947, that is till the independence of India. So the whole point which I am trying to convey is the rulers of the princely states, the rulers of the kingdoms suffered very much as a result of the imperial policies of the British. The British began coming up with numerous imperial schemes, and as a result of those imperial schemes, the rulers of the princely states suffered to a very great extent. Say, for example, one such ruler was Lakshmi Bai, or Jhansi Lakshmi Bai. So, in 1853, just 3 years before the outbreak of this revolt, in 1853, a governor general by name Dalhousie, applied an imperial policy called the doctrine of lapse to the kingdom of Jhansi Lakshmi Bai and took over her kingdom. So the point is, Dalhousie came up with an imperial scheme called the doctrine of lapse, and Dalhousie applied this doctrine, this imperial scheme to the kingdom of Jhansi Lakshmi Bai and took over her kingdom. That is, Dalhousie annexed the territory of Jhansi Lakshmi Bai to the British territories. So the whole point is, as a result of this imperial scheme, Jhansi Lakshmi Bai was the aggrieved party. So she suffered as a result of this imperial scheme. And therefore, when the sepoys revolted in 1857, soon afterwards, Jhansi Lakshmi Bai came forward and actively participated in the revolt. She actively participated in the 1857 revolt because she was the aggrieved one. She was the one who lost her kingdom way back in 1853 itself. And therefore, when the sepoys revolted, immediately she came forward and actively participated in the 1857 revolt. And similarly, we have Begum Hazrat Mahal, who happened to be the widow of Wajid Ali Shah. So Wajid Ali Shah was basically a ruler of a kingdom based in Uttar Pradesh called the Awadh kingdom. There was a kingdom called Awadh based in Uttar Pradesh. The ruler of the Awadh kingdom in 1856 was one Mr. Wajid Ali Shah. So in 1856, in the same year 1856, Dalhousie, the governor general, came up with another excuse came up with another imperial scheme called misgovernance. He came up with a scheme called misgovernance. Basically, Dalhousie argued that Wajid Ali Shah was an inefficient ruler, and therefore Dalhousie applied the doctrine of misgovernance to the Awadh kingdom and annexed the Awadh territory to British India. That is, British took over the kingdom of Awadh. British took over the kingdom, citing misgovernance of Wajid Ali Shah. So this was another imperial scheme implemented by the British. So the aggrieved party in this case was Wajid Ali Shah. In fact, Wajid Ali Shah died in 1856 itself, and Wajid Ali Shah's wife was Begum Hazrat Mahal. And therefore, when the revolt broke out, when the sepoys revolted in 1857, she very actively came forward and participated in the revolt. So I'm trying to give you the reasons that forced the rulers of the princely states to participate in the 1857 revolt. One reason is the imperial schemes adopted by the British in general, the British governors in general, and Governor General Lord Dalhousie in particular. So Dalhousie was an imperialist. Dalhousie was the Governor General between 1848 to 56. So during his time, during Dalhousie's time period, various princely states were annexed to British India. So that forced a couple of the princely states to actively participate in the 1857 revolt. And third is we have Nana Sahib. Nana Sahib was basically an adopted son of the Maratha ruler Baji Rao II. Nana Sahib was the adopted son of Baji Rao II, at a point, a Maratha ruler. So in 1818 itself, the British had taken over the territory of the Peshwas. So the Maratha rulers were also referred to as the Peshwas. So way back in 1818 itself, the British had taken over the territory of the Peshwas, at a point. And thereafterwards, the British paid pension. They paid pension to those Peshwas. So the British paid pension to the Peshwas between 1818 to 1856. But in 1856, what happened? The last Peshwa happened to be Baji Rao II. And Baji Rao II had an adopted son by name Nana Sahib. So as long as Baji Rao II was alive, pension was paid. But when Nana Sahib, the point is the British stopped paying pension to Nana Sahib. Got to point. Let me repeat this point once again. The point is the British way back in 1818 itself took over the territory of the Peshwas. The Peshwa rulers were paid pension. But the last Peshwa happened to be Nana Sahib. This Nana Sahib was denied pension by the British. Basically, this policy of denying pension to the adopted children was introduced during the time period of Dalhousie. Dalhousie argued that pension will be paid only to the biological children of the rulers. But since Nana Sahib was the adopted son, so Dalhousie declared that adopted children will not be given any kind of a pension. So the aggrieved party in this case was Nana Sahib. So he too was the affected party as a result of the British imperial schemes, imperial policies. So therefore, when in 1857, when the sepoys revolted, Nana Sahib also actively came forward and participated in the revolt. So the whole point which I am trying to convey is in 1857, a major revolt broke out in India. We call this revolt as the Sepoys Revolt. Reasons I told you. But the point is this revolt was not confined to the Sepoys alone. It also saw the participation of the other sections of Indian society. Example, the rulers. So I gave you the reasons that forced the rulers, a few rulers, to participate in the 1857 revolt. I gave you the example of Jhansi Lakshmi Bai, I gave you the example of Hazrat Mahal, I gave you the example of Nana Sahib. That's the point. Now come to The zamindars. Zamindars, these are the landlords. So the point is, the landlords were required to pay land revenue. They were required to pay land revenue to the British in time. The zamindars are basically the large landholders. The landholders, got your point. And these zamindars were required to pay land revenue in time to the British. In case they failed to pay the land revenue, in case the zamindars failed to pay the land revenue in time to the British, in such cases, the lands of the zamindars were taken over by the British. They began to be taken over by the British. The British basically began to confiscate the lands of the zamindars in case the zamindars failed to pay the land revenue in time to the British. So therefore, some of the zamindars were aggrieved. Some of the zamindars suffered as a result of these policies of the British, and therefore they too were under great distress. So they were also looking for an opportunity to revolt against the British. So as soon as the sepoys revolted in 1857, a few of the zamindars came forward and actively participated in the 1857 revolt. Remember, zamindars are basically large landholders. They suffered as a result of the British policies, and as a result, the point is, when the sepoys revolted in 1857, so this group, the zamindars, they actively came forward. Not all, a few of the zamindars actively came forward and participated in the 1857 revolt. And similarly, the ordinary peasants, the small time peasants, got your point, the small cultivators of the land. So the peasants also very actively participated in the 1857 revolt. Why? The reason being, the peasants were under heavy burden of taxes. The peasants were under the heavy burden of land taxes. So the British began collecting large share of the produce as a large share of the produce as a land revenue. So as a result, the peasants were under great economic distress. Let me repeat. The peasant, these are the small cultivators of the land. They were under heavy burden of taxation. They were under the burden of heavy taxation. So the British began taking away a large part of their agricultural produce as land revenue. So as a result, the peasants also suffered under the British. So in 1857, when the sepoys revolted, the peasants actively came forward and gave their full support to the sepoys. Then the artisans, that is those who were employed in the traditional industries, also actively came forward and participated in the revolt. Reason? The point is, the British policies, the British economic policies resulted in the deindustrialization of India. So basically the British policies, the British economic policies resulted in the deindustrialization of India. So as a result, the artisans began to lose their employment opportunities. They began to lose their employment opportunities. So this is obviously would happen when deindustrialization take place. The artisans began to lose their employment. So the artisans in a way also suffered as a result of the British economic policies. So they too were looking for an opportunity to revolt. So therefore, in 1857, they too came forward and actively participated in the revolt. And finally, the conservative Indians, they too very actively participated in the revolt. The reason being, the British came with numerous social reforms, like say in 1829, the British came up with the Sati Abolition Act. The British came up with an act called Sati Abolition Act, under which the practice of sati was declared illegal. You know what is sati. The practice of sati was declared illegal in 1829. But a section of Indians uh, began began to argue that the British is unnecessarily interfering in the socio-cultural matters of the Indians. The point is, British abolished Sati Abolition Act. British came up with the Sati Abolition Act, abolishing the practice of sati. Basically, a section of Indians were not happy with this legislation. A section of the Indians began to feel that the British were unnecessarily interfering in the socio-cultural matters of the Indians. I just gave you one example. In fact, in the first half of the 19th century AD, that is between 1800 to 1850, the British did come up with numerous social legislations. One such social legislation was the Sati Abolition Act. So these social legislations were not to the liking of the conservative Indians. The conservative Indians began to feel that the British was unnecessarily interfering in the socio-cultural matters of the Indians. So therefore, they too were looking for an opportunity to revolt. When the Sepoys revolted in 1857, they too actively came forward and gave their full support to the Sepoys. This is what happened. Now come to the Sepoys. Why did the Sepoys revolt? This is the point which we need to be answering. Why did the Sepoys revolt? I told you it was the Sepoys who initiated this revolt. We call this as the Sepoys mutiny. But why did the Sepoys revolt? Sepoys revolted for a variety of reasons. One, discrimination. So I told you the British Indian Army comprised of both the Indian soldiers. It also comprised of the British soldiers. So there was a lot of discrimination between the Indian and British soldiers. There was the British officers. The Indian soldiers were discriminated in terms of pay, in terms of promotions with respect to the British soldiers. So when compared to the British counterparts, let me repeat, when compared to the British counterparts, the Indian soldiers received less salaries, they were denied promotions, etc., etc. So there was a lot of discrimination in the British Indian Army. They were discriminated in terms of pay, they were discriminated in terms of promotions when compared to their British counterparts. So for the same kind of work, usually the British soldiers were paid more when compared to the Indian soldiers. So there was a lot of discontentment existing among the Indian soldiers, that is the Sepoys. That became reason number one for the Sepoys revolting. So reason number one for Sepoys revolt is discrimination. The second reason is the activities of the Christian missionaries. So the Christian missionaries were quite active in the cantonment areas. Cantonment, you all know, the regions where the army establishments exist are called as the cantonments. So in the cantonment areas, the Christian missionaries were very active, and the Christian missionaries, with the help of the senior army officers, were putting pressure on the Sepoys to get converted to Christianity. Sepoys are basically Indian soldiers. So the Christian missionaries, with the support of the senior British officers, were putting pressure on the Sepoys to get converted to Christianity. So this became the second reason for the Sepoys revolting against the British. So basically there was growing discontentment among the Sepoys from a very long time period. This became the second reason. Third is the religious sentiments. So basically the British had absolutely no regard to the religious sentiments of the Sepoys. That's the point. So for example, the Hindu Sepoys particularly believed that travel over the sea would result in they losing their caste permanently. Let me repeat, the British had absolutely no regard for the religious sentiments of the Indian sepoys or the Indian soldiers. For example, the Hindu sepoys had a belief that travel over the sea would result in they losing their caste permanently. And therefore, the Hindu sepoys working for the British Indian Army always resisted traveling over the seas. But in 1824, the British fought a war in Burma. The British in 1824 fought a war in Burma. So during this war, we call this as the Anglo-Burmese War. During this war, the British forced the Indian sepoys, including the Hindus, to travel over the seas. Even though it was severely resisted by the Hindu sepoys. The point is there was a lot of resistance from the Hindu sepoys to travel over the sea. But even then, the British soldiers forced the Hindu sepoys to travel over the sea. So, as a result, there was growing discontentment among the Indian sepoys. So, the whole point which I'm trying to convey is the religious sentiments of the Indian soldiers were disregarded by the British. The case in point is the disregard for the religious beliefs of the Hindu sepoys. The case in point is the British disregard for the religious beliefs of the Hindu sepoys. Example, I told you, Hindus, they believed that travel over the seas would lead to they losing their caste permanently, and hence they always resisted travel over the seas. But what was the position taken by the British? The British basically forced the sepoys, including the Hindu sepoys, to travel over the sea. So therefore, the religious sentiments of the Hindu sepoys were hurt. So this became another important reason for the outbreak of the 1857 revolt. Then in 1856, an year before the outbreak of the revolt, the British came up with an act called the General Service Enlistment Act. Just a year before the outbreak of the 1857 revolt, that is in 1856, the British came up with an act called the General Service Enlistment Act. That's the point. So under this act, the denial of the orders of the superiors would lead to the automatic termination from the service of the sepoys. So basically, the General Service Enlistment Act had numerous strict provisions. According to the provisions of this act, the denial of the orders of the superiors would lead to automatic termination from the service of the sepoys. In other words, if any British officer issues any instruction to the sepoys were required to implement that order, failing which the sepoys were to be terminated from their service automatically. So this act was introduced in 1856, which further fueled discontentment, which further increased discontentment among the sepoys. Already the sepoys were discontented. The sepoys already were a discontented lot, but this act increased. It basically created lot of frustration and discontentment among the sepoys. The General Service Enlistment Act. Remember this point. And finally, the 1857 revolt, the immediate reason, in fact, for one of the immediate reasons for the outbreak of the 1857 revolt was a controversy called Enfield rifles. The Enfield rifles happened to be an advanced rifles of those days. and advanced rifles of those days. And these rifles were introduced in 1850s in the British Indian Army. And in 1857, a rumor began making rounds that the cartridge used in these rifles was greased with the fat of a pig and a cow. Let me repeat. Enfield rifles were introduced in the British Indian Army in 1850, and these were the advanced rifles of those days. And in 1857, a rumor began making rounds that the cartridge used in this rifle, the cartridge used in this cartridge is a bullet used in this rifles was greased with the fat of the cow and pig. And this rumor, this in fact this was just a rumor, and this rumor began making rounds in 1857. And the point is, Muslims do not like they dislike pig. They do not consume the meat of pig at all. On the other hand, cow is a very sacred animal for the Hindus. The Hindus cannot think of using anything that is made of cow. Got the point? So basically, there was a rumor that was making rounds that the cartridge used in this rifle was greased with the fat of pig and cow. Immediately, the Hindu sepoys and the Muslim sepoys of the British Indian Army refused to use the Enfield rifles. They refused to use the Enfield rifles. So the introduction of the Enfield rifles in the British Indian Army became one more reason for the outbreak of the 1857 revolt. Let me repeat this point once again. This revolt, this Enfield rifle was introduced in 1850s, but in 1857, a rumor relating to the Enfield rifles began to make rounds, and therefore the introduction of this rifle itself became one of the reasons for the outbreak of the revolt. That's the point. Now take a look at the immediate factor. What are the immediate factors? So there are two immediate factors responsible for the outbreak of the 1857 uprising or revolt. So there are two immediate factors. One factor is Mangal Pandey's rebellion, not Meerut. Factor number A, subpoint is Mangal Pandey's rebellion. So Mangal Pandey was basically a sepoy working in the Barakpur regiment of Bengal. So Mangal Pandey was a sepoy working in the Barakpur regiment of Bengal. So Mangal Pandey refused to use the Enfield rifle. Got your point? Basically, Mangal Pandey refused to use the Enfield rifle. So for which Mangal Pandey was terminated from the service. He was basically removed from the service. So in a fit of anger, in a fit of rage, Mangal Pandey opened fire and injured two British officers. Mangal Pandey, because he was removed from the service, he opened fire, injuring two British officers. Immediately, Mangal Pandey was arrested. After a quick trial, Mangal Pandey was hanged by the British on 8th April 1857. This is what happened. So on 8th April 1857, Mangal Pandey was hanged. Hanged because he refused to use the Enfield rifles for which he was removed from the job. So in a fit of anger, Mangal Pandey opened fire, injuring two British officers. Following that episode, Mangal Pandey was arrested and hanged on 8th April 1857. So this became one of the immediate factors responsible for the 1857 revolt or mutiny. The second immediate factor is refusal to use the cartridges by the sepoys of Meerut. So Meerut is a town located in Uttar Pradesh. So the sepoys the Indian soldiers of Meerut also refused to use the cartridges used in the Enfield rifles. Basically, refusal to use the Enfield rifles. So basically, the sepoys of Meerut refused to use the Enfield rifles. So immediately, 85 sepoys of the Meerut regiment were arrested. After a quick trial, 85 sepoys of the Meerut regiment were sentenced to 10 years of imprisonment. So basically, 85 sepoys of the Meerut regiment refused to use the same Enfield rifle. They were arrested. They were terminated from the service. A case was also filed against them. After a quick trial, these 85 sepoys were given 10 years of imprisonment. Chapter point. So this imprisonment of the 85 sepoys became the immediate reason for the outbreak of the 1857 revolt. So it is following this episode. Basically, the imprisonment was done. Basically, the 85 sepoys were imprisoned on 9th of May 1857. On 8th April 1857, Mangal Pandey was hanged. On 9th May 1857, that is approximately a month later, these 85 sepoys of the Meerut regiment were given 10 years of imprisonment. So it was after this imprisonment, there was an outbreak of a revolt in Meerut. So basically the Meerut, the soldiers, the Indian sepoys or these Indian soldiers of the Meerut regiment revolted against the British. At a point. So the following day, that is on the 10th May 1857, let me repeat what happened. Basically on 9th May 1857, these 85 soldiers were given 10 years of imprisonment. The following day, that is on 10th May 1857, the soldiers, the Indian soldiers of Meerut regiment revolted on a large scale against the British. So they killed the British officers. They also set free the 85 sepoys of, they also released the 85 sepoys of the Meerut regiment. Basically, 85 sepoys were arrested by the British, and these revolters, that is the soldiers of the Meerut regiment, they succeeded in getting these 85 sepoys released, and thereafterwards these soldiers of Meerut regiment proceeded to Delhi, and in Delhi they requested the Mughal ruler Bahadur Shah Zafar to accept the leadership of the revolt. So the whole point which I'm trying to convey is, it was on 10th May 1857, the sepoys of Meerut decided to end the British rule. It was on 10th of May 1857, the sepoys of Meerut took a decision to revive the Mughal rule. And the Mughal ruler at the time was one Mr. Bahadur Shah. The same day, that is on 10th May 1857, the sepoys of Meerut marched from Meerut to Delhi, met the Mughal ruler Bahadur Shah Zafar, and requested him to accept the leadership of the revolt. At a point, initially Bahadur Shah was reluctant, but upon the insistence of these sepoys, Bahadur Shah agreed to become the leader of the revolt. This is what happened. This is exactly what happened. So the whole point which I am trying to convey is, it was on 10th of May 1857, the sepoys of Meerut decided to end the British rule and revive the Mughal rule. And the following day, they proceeded, that is on 11th of May 1857, they met Bahadur Shah Zafar. They marched to Delhi. They went to Delhi all the way from Meerut. They requested Bahadur Shah Zafar to accept the leadership of the revolt. But initially, Bahadur Shah was reluctant. But upon the insistence of these Indian soldiers, Bahadur Shah agreed to become the leader of the revolt. And as soon as he took over the leadership of the revolt soon spread to other parts of North India. So first the leadership began in, first the revolt began in Delhi. Soon afterwards, it spread to the other parts of India. Say for example, it spread to Kanpur, Lucknow, Jhansi, etc. etc. First, the revolt happened in Delhi, but soon afterwards, it spread to the other parts of North India, like Kanpur, Lucknow, Jhansi, etc. That's the point. So the point is, all the names which I have discussed in the beginning, like say Jhansi Lakshmi Bai actively participated in it. Birjis Qadir, who happened to be the son of the Awadh ruler Wajid Ali Shah, participated in this revolt. So Tantia Tope, another main important personality, also participated in this 1857 revolt. So the whole point is, revolt began in Delhi, soon it spread to other parts of North India, and the traditional leaders of the Indian society came forward and provided leadership to the sepoys. This is what happened. That's the point. But the point is, by more or less by the end of 1857, the British succeeded in putting down the revolt. By the end of 1857, the British succeeded in completely crushing the 1857 revolt. This is what happened. That's the point. Some other day, we can discuss the factors responsible for the failure of the 1857 revolt. But in this class, I discussed with you the reasons. Why did this revolt break out? Those reasons I have discussed with you. In some other class, I will take up a discussion on the factors responsible for the failure of the 1857 revolt. Basically, by the end of 1857, of course, in some regions of North India, the revolt continued till 1859, but by and large, by the end of 1857, the revolt of 1850, the Sepoys revolt was completely crushed by the British. This is what happened. That's all about this topic. Some other day, I will take up the related discussion related to this very topic. If you have any doubts, you may start raising questions. Any doubt, anyone? Any doubt, anyone? So do attend our lectures. Do keep watching. You continue watching all the lectures. So in the coming days, I will take up discussion on other topics as well. Fine. That's all for the day. See you in the next class. Thank you, Sri Lakshmi. Also ask all of your friends, if they are preparing for UPSC, to keep watching our lectures. That's the point. Thank you. See you in the next class.